Hello and welcome to Moment of Truth on Labour Social. I'm Graham Hughes. Many of us are quite understandably raging right now over what this Brexit government has done to this country. Our living costs are through the roof, inflation is through the roof, the mortgage rates are through the roof, the NHS is on its knees, our rivers are full of shocking amounts of human excrement, our railways aren't fit for purpose, young people have given up even dreaming of ever owning a house, everyone is on strike, nothing works, and the world is on fire. You'll think by now Brexit voters would have come to understand that they've been conned. Life hasn't got better since we've left the EU. In fact, it's got demonstrably worse. And to be fair, in a recent poll from UK in a Changing Europe, only 18% of Leave voters think Brexit has been a success. Progress? Well, yes and no. In the group that thinks it hasn't been a success, 70% thinks that it could have been. They might be disillusioned with the actuality of Brexit, but they're still in love with the idea. What gives? To understand this phenomenon, you have to understand something about basic human psychology. We're essentially love machines. Not in a James Brown way, in a our species would otherwise be extinct way. Love pushes us to procreate. The problem is that falling in love is way too easy. Our higher brain functions rarely get a say in the matter, and we all too often fall in love with not just the wrong person, but the wrong thing. Think about the last time you fell in love with someone who, for whatever reason, you shouldn't have fallen in love with. Someone who was utterly toxic and it ended horribly. Obviously, you'll have very different feelings about the person now, but how did it make you feel at the time? How did you behave? You couldn't stop thinking about them, right? You were a bit obsessed. You made some horrifically poor decisions. Maybe you compromised your morals. You minimized about the bad things and accentuated the good. And here's the killer. You wouldn't listen to reason because love has very little to do with reason. Your friends tried to warn you. You didn't want to hear it. You knew better. You were in control of your emotions. You could change them if only. But what if instead of falling in love with a person, you fall in love with a thing? Let's take smoking, for example. How does that fit with the feeling of being in a toxic relationship? There are definite similarities. Cigarettes are the first thing you think of when you wake up in the morning. They're on your mind all day. You spend an inordinate amount of your money on them. You know that they're not good for you, but that's okay because you convince yourself you can quit at any time. Then you try to leave them, and for some reason, you just can't. The same can be said about drugs, so maybe it's a chemical thing. After all, nicotine is known to be pretty addictive, as are opiates. But how does this explain about people getting addicted to gambling or Pokemon Go or Fortnite? Again, the similarities to being in love are there. People claim to have an addictive personality when that's not really a thing. We can all become addicted to something. What they've done is fallen in love. They just don't realize it. I'm not saying that love is a bad thing. People who have a healthy obsession with, say, Star Trek still go on to lead meaningful and productive lives. While a healthy love of our friends, family, and planet can make us better people, the darker side of love, the obsession, the jealousy, the paranoia, the mood swings, the fear of abandonment, the stubborn refusal to deal with the reality right there in front of you, can drive any one of us into madness. We love our mum and dad when we're growing up because we're hardwired to. We can't help it. It's familiar love. It's family love. It's quite different from romantic love. Being born into religion is a lot like the love you have for your family. You grow up with it. It's something that's just there. You don't know any different. We tend not to think about the theological underpinnings too much. Many of us continue to love our parents and practice our religion into adult life. However, because that love isn't the same as romantic love, it doesn't have the same underlying obsession. When facts present themselves that, I don't know, perhaps you see that your mum or dad isn't actually a nice person, or you realize that magically surviving your own death is a bit unlikely, you might modify your stance. You may cut one or both parents out of your life. You might renounce your faith. Yeah, it's tough and it rarely happens overnight, but the difficulty lies in breaking a routine, not walking away from what you believe to be the love of your life. This is why religious fanatics, cult members, and converts are so zealous. They're not feeling that family style love. They're feeling for their faith. They're feeling something akin to romantic love. That same obsession, the same jealousy, paranoia, the same desire to extol the virtues of the thing that they love to all and sundry, while making excuses for the more negative aspects of their faith. Viewed through this prism, it makes albeit horrible sense for the cultists of Jonestown to drink the Kool-Aid, for the suicide bombers to do what they do. The 9/11 hijackers truly believed that they were doing the 3,000 people that they murdered a favor. As horrific as this sounds, deep down, they weren't motivated by hate. They were motivated by a cruel bastardization of love. A large proportion of the German population in the 1930s would have balked at the idea of being motivated by hatred of Jews or freedom or democracy. They would simply state that they loved their country, and they did. But for anyone perceived as standing in the way, that love was lethal. To go back to the example of the toxic relationship, remember thinking, if only they could see what I see. This idea that if your friends and family could understand the true wonderfulness of that person you're in love with, they could finally be happy for you. But your friends, your family, they're not blinded by the same love as you. They can see the brutal reality clear as day. And they think you're insane for putting up with it. It breaks their heart that you, with your academic achievements, you who built your own business from scratch, you who they've always been so proud of, could do something so incredibly stupid as to fall in love with the wrong person. And therein lies the rub. Love has nothing to do with intelligence. It's pure emotion, a force of nature, not an output source from cool, hard logic. Logic falls apart in the face of love, which is why valid criticism of a person's partner, a fanatic's religion, or maybe a cokehead's addiction, will often be met with fury and even violence. In the same way that people are willing to upend their life, suffer unnecessarily, or even kill for the person that they adore, even if he or she is a rat, they will be willing to do the same for the thing that they love. And what have millions of Brits fallen in love with over the last decade? Brexit. This is why so many of them will defend it to the death. No matter that the pound has lost 25% of its value, no matter that foreign investment in the UK has gone off a cliff, no matter that their children are no longer talking to them, it could have been so beautiful. If only it had been done properly. You can throw facts at them until you're blue in the face. It makes no difference. They are in love. It's not that they don't care. They're not being obtuse. They are genuinely blinded by their love of Brexit. This misfiring of love has been at least partly responsible for some of the most horrific episodes in history. You can see it every time hordes of people get swept up in some kind of mania. For those of us on the outside, those of us who cannot begin to understand what's so great about that person, idea, thing, it can be frustrating as hell. And I can remember being sad while watching news in the past, and horrified, yes, and definitely angry. But for the life of me, I can't recall a time I felt so infuriated seeing otherwise intelligent people gung-ho for an economic catastrophe of our own making. I've got a good idea. Let's impose economic sanctions on ourselves. The warnings we gave were waved away as Project Fear, just like what people said to Winston Churchill in the run-up to World War II. Brexit voters were utterly convinced that they'll be fine and it will be worth it. And now, even when it's been proven to be demonstrably untrue, they still cling onto the rotting corpse of Brexit, barking at anyone who comes near that it could have been amazing. If it hadn't been for COVID, if it hadn't been for Ukraine, if it hadn't been for Boris Johnson. The sad truth is that most of us know from bitter experience that it takes something major to snap people out of their reverie. And although the vast majority of Leave voters now understand that Brexit has turned out badly, too many still can't accept that it was a bad idea to begin with. Let me be clear. Brexit is, was, and always will be a toxic relationship between the ruling classes and the rest of us, built on nothing but lies, abuse, and broken promises. Don't let anyone gaslight you otherwise.